How well do we really know our acquaintances or even our loved ones? This is the true crime story of John Douglas New. Crime is not at all rare in Wyoming County, West Virginia. The opioid epidemic has hit the small towns of this area hard, much as it has so many other rural places in America. The vast majority of criminal activity in the area involves selling, possessing, or obtaining drugs. So when a brutal murder robbery was committed on a cold February day in 2013, many assumed it was drug-related. John New was hired on as a barback to help stock beverages when coolers needed filling, as well as a bouncer at the small-town bar that I worked for nearly a decade. Quiet, respectful, and never once rude or even slightly off-putting, the 19-year-old from Coal Mountain worked only 2 to 3 months when one evening, upon coming in to open the bar and do all the usual preparatory work, I was informed he'd gotten a job at the local coal mines, as many of the young local men eventually seemed to do, and that he'd moved on. So, needless to say, when I learned of the atrocious crime he'd committed on February 12, 2013, only a short while after he'd quit working at the bar, I was absolutely stunned. This polite young man with the very best of manners had apparently murdered, robbed, and possibly sexually assaulted a beloved 60-year-old school bus driver in the neighboring town of Brenton. Police incident reports stated that the victim, Frances Elaine Birchfield, returned her home at Mill Creek Road at approximately 6 p.m. after work. Local Sheriff Randall Aliff stated that John was believed to have been in the process of burglarizing Elaine's home at the time. Elaine was found dead in her bed by her son, and her GMC Sierra K1500, along with some cash from the home, were missing. Her cause of death has never been made public. A neighbor reported seeing a man beating aggressively on the victim's door earlier in the day, and the witness had stated she recognized the man to be John New, as he'd lived in the area previously. The neighbor also advised that she'd become worried upon seeing the man at Elaine's door and had tried to call the victim's cell phone to no avail, as she did not pick up. After the murdered woman's son had come by to check on his mother and discovered the horrific scene, an all-points bulletin was quickly put out on Elaine's GMC truck. Shortly after midnight, John New was spotted by a local woman driving the vehicle through Gilbert in Mingo County. It is common for many residents in this rural area to listen to police chatter on scanners in their home, and most likely the witness who'd spotted the truck had heard the details of the APB this way. After the report of the missing truck sighting, John was pulled over and arrested, initially for charges of driving without a license and possession of a concealed weapon without a permit. Once he was brought in and questioned by the Gilbert Police Department, he confessed to the murder of Frances Elaine Birchfield. When the final reports of what had led up to and taken place in the incident were made public, Sheriff Aliff stated that John New had been discovered burglarizing Elaine's home when she had returned from work alone, and that she had been murdered by him because of it. The sheriff stated there was no known past relationship between the victim and the perpetrator, and there was no drug-related connection. Nothing except the truck and an undisclosed amount of cash had been taken with regards to the daytime burglary of Elaine's home. So here's the part where my own experience with this convicted murderer plays a large role in why I think there's a lot more to this story. First, John was never a known drug user, but his girlfriend at the time absolutely was. For the sake of anonymity, and in the event that the girlfriend was not involved, I won't include her name or show her face, but we'll call her Tracy. It was common knowledge at the time that Tracy would use sex to obtain drugs regularly. She was in no way discreet about her association with certain local drug dealers or the context of her relationship with them. John had met Tracy at the bar in which I worked alongside him for that short period, and he seemed, to me at least, to be very much in love with Tracy. Now, Tracy, on the other hand, seemed like she'd really been interested in John at first, but she was soon back to her old ways. Within a couple months of the pair dating, they'd announced that they were engaged to be married, yet Tracy could still be spotted around town with various men who were known drug dealers. While John was swooning over his soon-to-be bride, Tracy would often tell myself and others at the bar how very little she actually cared for her fiancé. So which makes more sense? That a then 20-year-old young man would take a life and basically throw away his freedom for a GMC truck and an undetermined amount of cash, or that there is so much more to this crime than we know? I can't help but feel that only a very small amount of truth has come to light about this incident. There are still so many unanswered questions. Why did John New commit such a horrible crime? Why was he charged with, but not convicted, of the sexual assault that was reported in this case? Why did he drive Elaine's truck through a town that he knew practically every person in, rather than fleeing? And most importantly of all, why did Elaine Birchfield have to die? None of the reported information and John's subsequent actions seemed to make sense, especially when considering he had had no previous drug issues, no violent tendencies, and no criminal record in general with the exception of driving offenses. I've written to John New, who is currently serving a life sentence without mercy, the highest sentence that can be given in the state of West Virginia, in Mount Olive Correction Center. Hopefully he can shed some light on this senseless crime.